Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to tonight's discussion around Wild Nights Out. My name's Rosie, and I run the events for Chelsea Green UK. We're an independent publisher in the US and UK and publish a range of titles, all on the politics and practice of sustainable living. So we're super excited to have two amazing outdoor educators tonight, Chris Salisbury and Jon Cree. And I think particularly at a time when so many of us are looking to explore nature, get out of our homes after lockdown, we're excited to have Chris and Jon here to bring us a whole new realm of discoveries and activities and stories for exploring nature once the sun goes down, which isn't normally when you think about going outside, but there are amazing things to do at night. So just before we get started, there is a little chat box. If you have any questions, just pop it in there. You can let us know where you're listening from. We'll always like to hear from participants because you can't see you. And first, just a little bit of background. So Jon is a longtime ecological educator, trainer, and author. He has worked with all ages, but his passion has been working with connecting adolescents to each other and the natural world. So he facilitates a whole suite of courses for educators, blending personal development with natural world connection. And he's also been a trainer for the Institute for Earth Education for several decades. And he's the founding director of the amazing Forest School Association and still practices forest school at a community wood. And he's also just written a book called The Essential Guide to Forest School and Nature Pedagogy, which is out and available wherever books are sold. And then Jon's going to be in conversation with his pal, Chris Salisbury, who has just published Wild Nights Out, published by Chelsea Green. And he founded Wildwise in 1999 after working for the Devon Wildlife Trust, and has a background in theater, training in therapy, and a career in environmental education. So his work also encourages people to get outside and value the natural world. And Chris directs the Call of the Wild Foundation program for educators in training, as well as the Where the Wild Things Are is a rewilding adventure in Embercombe in Devon. He's also a professional storyteller and founded the West Country and Oxford Storytelling Festivals. So that's just a quick bit about both Jon and Chris, and I'm going to hand over to you guys to take it from here. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rosie. So, just gonna put this on just so we can see ourselves a bit more. Hi everybody, thanks for coming along tonight. And it's a pleasure just to finally see this come to fruition. Wild Nights Out, the magic of exploring the outdoors after dark. And I've witnessed and been a bit of part of the process of Chris writing this and coming through to fruition this year. It's been funny, we've been sort of there in tandem, publishing books. And this one in particular is pretty unique. There's not another one like it in the world. And it's been desperately needed in the whole world of nature connection and environmental education. And it is one big invite, really, for me. The whole book is just inviting you to explore that dark realm. So I just thought we'd kick off before I start asking Chris a few questions and quizzing him. We get into a discussion about it with just an opening of a poem from Winston Abbott, because it's that edgy time, and I know at about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock tonight, it'll start to get a bit edgy. We've got loads of meteor showers coming in tonight here in the UK. So here we go. Let's just kick it off with this from Winston Abbott. Blessed be the night. Twilight is a time for sharing, a time for remembering, sharing the fragrance of the cooling earth, the shadows of the gathering dust. Twilight is a time for sharing and a time for remembering, sharing the fragrance of the cooling earth, the shadows of the gathering dusk. So what drew you, Chris, to write about those shadows? Bring this book to fruition, because Wild Nights Out's been going on for a long time, hasn't it, as an event?
Well, that's true. There's a little bit of provenance maybe to speak of. Just first, thanks everyone for being there, wherever there is. Strange medium. And thanks, John, for showing up as well, just to have this little conversation. Yes, well, Wild Nights Out, the title is taken from events that I used to run for Devon Wildlife Trust. This is back in the 1990s, where we would take school children initially out on our nature reserves and give them a flavour of the natural world, encounters with all those mysteries that are out there. And of course, on an overnight wildlife camp, we'd be out for a night walk. And they were originally called Friday Night Experiences, and we changed the name to Wild Nights Out. And I have to say, you know, these were very big experiences for the children. Yeah. I mean, really being out at night, you know, in the dark, in a wild place, and then coming back to the campfire for stories, you know, and then sleeping in a tent and getting up at dawn for a little sit, and it just blew their heads off, and they were very successful. So we ran those for all the 7 years I was there, did hundreds of them. So yeah, looking back, when I was thinking of a title for this book, it seemed apposite really to call it A Wild Night Out, which was a bit of a, you know, catchy title.
Yeah. And part of it, the magic of exploring the outdoors after dark. So I just wanted to kick off with that, because often the dark is not something that's been totally embraced by the nature connection movement, and it's often seen as that scary thing to do. So I just wonder how you felt this really deepens nature connection when we take away one of our big senses. Really,
that's right. I mean, there are all sorts of forces at play, really, when the sun goes down, when the light changes, the temperature changes, you know, there's a different sort of soundtrack, the between of the dusk of creatures going back to, you know, where they belong in burrow and nest and set and whatever refuge they have, and then all those nocturnal creatures emerging, a bit of a sort of, you know, crossing place. So quite a threshold time, which in itself has its own kind of energy and excitement. And of course, when the light level drops, all the mystery shows up, you know, what we cannot see, we are rather intrigued by or afraid of. So it's kind of charged, I suppose, in a different way than the daytime, when everything is sort of has substance, it has definition, it has shape, and, you know, the light of our understanding, whereas the dark has none of that. And I think in our biology, there's probably quite a bit of sort of cellular memory where we were not, you know, the top predator, particularly at night. We were very vulnerable. So I think we've got a sort of trepidation, and we've got some kind of cellular trembling that happens maybe on a very subtle level as we step over that threshold as the night comes on, because who knows, you know, what might happen out there. For me, gaining acquaintance with the nighttime, the fear has subsided. It's not that there's not trepidation there still, particularly in the forest, but acquaintance has gained a certain familiarity and an enjoyment and a pleasure in the quiet and the silence and the refuge of the night. And good old Britain, you know, being as benign as it is, you know, particularly in the wild places, there's really very little to fear out there. So actually, it's a place of quite some sanctuary once we get over that fear.
That threshold. So do you think there's something, as you talk about cellular trembling, I just wonder whether that does bring us closer to the more than human, the elements of the planet, than during the day, when we tend to sort of be more comfortable, relaxed, and can almost brush it aside. Is there something that brings a certain alertness and closeness?
Yeah. Yes, no, you're right. I mean, there is the fear, you know, of the danger, and in modern contemporary situation we find ourselves in, where there's that disconnection has happened over this, one generation. We're not so familiar with it, and we really do genuinely fear what we cannot see and what might be out there. And as a boy, with an imagination, there was plenty out there to frighten me, and that's even inside my own house. I was terrified of the dark when I was a kid. I mean, quite rightly, it's biological. It's kind of in the wiring. So it has taken an awful lot of kind of trips out there. I also think, though, that it offers us something from the realm of wonder at night time. It's not that you can't find that in the daytime, but at night, the sort of cosmic kind of, play of the night sky somehow kind of induces this experience of wonder and wonderment, with the phases of the moon, or beholding a starry sky, the silence, the sudden shriek of whatever creature that was, the shadows moving. There's wonderment there as well, and that's its own form of connection, and it's something it's kind of tricky for educators in a way to just make happen, but actually stepping out into the night with the enticement of nocturnal animals and creatures that you can actually get close to and hear, and this phenomena of the night sky and perspective of our littleness, our humanness, in a great big universe, I think is also a big part of it. So that's why we always include night walks and nighttime experiences on our camps and events.
Yeah, it's something about just suddenly finding our place in space, isn't there? In this sort of infinite, seemingly infinite universe. I just want to, just you speaking there takes me back to taking a group out from the middle of Sheffield. Never been out at night before, and one little girl was just lying down looking at the night sky, and I was sort of beckoning them to stand up and come go, and none of them would leave. This one little girl said, "I've just been watching that half moon jump from branch to branch. Can we stay a little bit longer? Because we really are moving at an incredible speed, aren't we?" I just realised that, yeah, we're so small. So I wonder whether there was any particular things or experiences, and we'll talk about what's in the book in a minute, but that sort of have struck you, just being out with groups at night, that have suddenly landed.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of the simple practice of marinating in the dark has been fed back as a profound life experience. So off we go on the trail with a little lantern and head out into the forest, which is a darker place, because of the canopy and the closed environment. So the encouragement is to sit out for a while on your own, and it might only be for 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes. And what you're doing is you're sort of marinating in this experience of the dark, which, when you think about it, we don't give ourselves anymore. I mean, we're naturally drawn into the light, of course. Historically, traditionally, when the fire was lit, we would gather around that, and that would offer us warmth and light and protection. But to go and sit for the sake of it in the dark has been a really deep experience for folks on those events, and they fed back over the years how profound it is to sit with the sanctuary of the dark, in this context, no longer afraid of the dark, but actually appreciating what it offers. And it turns out, of course, that the health aspect of exposing ourselves to the darkness is becoming more and more important. In the places that we live now, where there's so little natural dark, we can barely behold a night sky, a true night sky, with a dark sky anymore. Only a few places really left in Britain where we can do that. And if it's not the street lights, it's little kind of LED lights going on. So this experience of just pure darkness particularly enhanced in a wild place where you do have a soundtrack of nocturnal creatures, it does something to the system.
Yeah.
It turns out that, actually our kind of whole circadian system, relies on the rhythm of light and dark in order to help us sleep better. So on all sorts of levels, and we can go into the sort of poetical, aspect too, of course, because we project our imagination and we dream in the dark as well. But the physiological side too, just to allow ourselves to experience that. Turns out it's really good for you. Dark medicine.
Dark medicine.
Mm.
Yeah. It's funny. It's just made me think some of my best night's sleep are out when we're out in the woods, rather than being surrounded by electronic devices inside. And certainly that being able to experience true dark.
Well, it's a question for everyone, really. Where do you go to experience true darkness?
Yeah.
And even, outside on the moonless nights, under a cloud, under a thick canopy of forest, it would seem utterly dark to us, wouldn't it? We can't see our hand in front of our faces, but in fact there are photons floating about, enough for, tawny owls to navigate through the trees. But I think my darkest experience would be down a pothole in Devon, slithering down these god-awful little channels, down, and there's one near where I live, when you have to be guided down there, but right at the bottom there's a kind of, it opens out into a chamber, a cave, and it's got a little pool of water at the bottom. And we switched off our torches and we just sat. And I have to say, it was exquisite because it was properly dark and properly silent. All we could hear was the of the water.
Do that again.
Dripping occasionally. So yeah, I remember that, very, very fondly. But yeah, for anyone, it's a general question. Where do you go to the real natural dark?
It's tough, isn't it? And that's almost a general question about access to quality natural spaces as well.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the more recent research, certainly it's the latest Mental Health Awareness Week, which was all around nature connection, was about this inequality in terms of quality access to biodiverse spaces and spaces that are natural, that we actually feel better rather than in manicured green spaces. So that I think that is one of the issues that we all face, particularly in the nature connection community. How do we give more access to people?
Yeah. And probably access to the dark and the nighttime more challenging than obviously the daytime, which has an easier access. There's an easier trail to follow there, and a self-guided trail even to follow. But it's harder, isn't it, with all those barriers that are in the way, to step away, from all the distractions and diversions of an evening, of a nighttime, or a need to sleep, to encounter the wild dark. But it's always one of the most memorable experiences that you have. And you don't have to go alone, take a friend.
Absolutely.
It makes it fun.
And also just that whole facilitation with groups, I think, just that's why people come along on these experiences, because there's safety in the group, isn't there? So should we move to the book?
Indeed.
Which is what the book's about, really. It's about how do we facilitate for groups, people, these really dusk till dawn experiences. So do you want to give us a little bit of a flavour of what's in the book and how it will help?
Yeah.
Because I'm guessing most of the people here are probably practitioners. I noticed we've got a few forest school practitioners, which happens during the day. And I guess one of the reasons I'm behind this is we need to extend that to the whole day, particularly as we go into winter. There's a real opportunity to really watch that transition from the light side to the dark side. Yeah. So a bit about the book.
Well, I did write the book initially from 25 years experience guiding people on these sort of events, for practitioners to be able to pick up and use. Lots of ideas, resources, activities, reference materials. And in the end, it became a book that needed to sort of travel more widely than just the professional outdoors people. So working with Chelsea Green, we just steered it a little bit more to a more open and general market, because they saw the opportunity for not just educators and teachers and professionals in the field, actually for everyone, for grandparents, for parents who wanted to acquaint their children with the dark, with a few things. So there's some very practical sort of information in there. So some of the night explained, if you like, some of these mysteries anyway, just spelled out a little bit of what's going on, with the night sky, for example. So there's a bit about the night time sky and some of the stories of the stars, constellations, and how it all sort of works. People of my generation will remember Carl Sagan, and he had this program on the television that I was somehow stumbled into. It just blew my head off with his narratives about, big space, deep space. Extraordinary. We never had any of that sort of stuff at school, and I can't help feeling it would have helped somehow to have some bigger picture kind of storytelling about our place in space. I mean, not least so we remember our kind of humility and our fragility in this great dance through the solar system. So there's information about the night sky, and then there's the important time of the campfire. Ideas to play and be playful around the campfire, so some stories to tell, and poems perhaps to read out, and little activities and games you can do around the campfire. There's ideas about how to put a night walk together, some of those component parts that you might lead a short or a longer night walk. There's some bigger adventures described in there, like night paddles. And what else have I got on there? Oh yeah, some good information about our I think I've called it tools for the trade, our own capacities for meeting the nighttime in terms of our senses and what's going on with our senses, and just how we can sort of fine-tune them and refine them and improve them to perceive and deepen the connection when we go. So I think that's it. There's a few other little exploratory kind of ideas around our relationship to the dark, and also some of the phenomena in the dark, like the aurora borealis and bioluminescence. And, so some of these mysteries, if you like, are explained. So it's pretty dances here, there, and everywhere, really. Hopefully, quite a full, rounded, and useful kind of activity guidebook to this business of getting out at night.
Great.
I think, was there anything else? Oh, sorry. There's one more important little detail is, of course, those are dearly beloved nocturnal creatures. Whole chapter on discovering what's out there and all of their remarkable stories that they have to tell us.
I noticed we've got somebody from Canada, so there's nothing about bears in here, I'm afraid.
Long gone, the bear from these shores.
From his shores, So I was just thinking as you were speaking there about just that whole attunement and how hard you find it when working with groups. I guess it's different with every group. What is the attunement process that you need to go through in terms of really, I suppose, just shaking off those scary shackles and feeling part of it, and feeling comfortable about feeling part of it, so you can get to that place where you are sitting by yourself and it suddenly lands.
Yeah. And, sometimes the reverse is true. It might be appropriate with a particular, profile of a group to almost do the opposite and ramp it up a little bit and actually play around with what lurks out there, what might lurk out there. Sometimes I play a soundtrack, of the sort of, bellows and growls and, extraordinary sounds that you can hear at night. most will be familiar, for example, with the vixen's kind of scream, particularly in the winter. I mean, it's just terrifying if you don't know what it is. But, you know, actually, I might sort of play around with that and play around with our fear of the dark and almost cook it up a little bit, just to sort of raise the ante and bring those senses, heighten them even more, because that's what happens when we're a little bit afraid. We become very alert, and when we're very, very alert, we miss much less. You know, we're more sort of connective to our environment, of course. Otherwise, it might be a case of slowing down. It might be a case of, yeah, just chiming with slower rhythm. As the sun goes down, energetically, everything starts to sort of slow. I know that we, you know, culturally sort of have our perverse, you know, patterns of, you know, turning on the sort of loud music and going out dancing, and
yeah,
nothing wrong with that. But generally, you know, the kind of vibe is slowing down. So I think some of those attunements are also quite reflective. Sometimes they're sitting for a little bit,
yeah,
just listening in, paying attention through the ear, particularly to what we can see with our ears, which will reach much further, particularly again in forest environments. And so there's various, I suppose, of those sort of things. A story may well help. A little traditional story told about the night or the fear of the dark or something, just again to have everybody just sitting quietly and just slowing the day down and arriving into this other kind of realm. So there's a few, you know, attunements, as you call them, I think, but, you know, I think generally slowing down, you know, and moving quietly when we do, you know, step into it, get on the trail. The invitation will often be, how about we pull over this veil of silence, because our habit is to chat. And nothing wrong with that, but, you know, we're very social animals and we can be utterly sort of diverted by each other and forget to pay attention, you know, to what's around us. So often an invitation to be, you know, silent. Some pre-prep in the form of how to move quietly also helps get us in the zone, if you like. Kids love that stuff, but of course adults do too. Little sneaky games, which are fun, but also illustrate that in order to hear something else, we've got to stop hearing ourselves all the time. So yeah, moving quietly, stopping the socializing and starting to pay attention. It's an investment, isn't it? To pay is where it's costing you money. There's an investment made. Attention is where you're at tension, you're alert, you know. And this is true in the daytime. Whenever you go to encounter wildlife sort of close up, all these same things apply, but no more so than at night.
Yeah. The other thing you were just saying earlier on was just those little facts and reveals. And I remember I had a conversation a week afterwards saying, well, why on earth, if it's dark up there the whole time, why on earth is it light here? Surely that should be the question we're asking, rather than why is it dark? So what's your answer to that one? I just wonder whether you've got a story to go with that one.
It's so cool. I mean, yes, at night we ask the question, well, why is it dark? I mean, that's the ultimate riddle, because it's not quite the answer that you're all thinking. Because I just listening to what you're thinking, I can hear you all saying, well, because the sun goes down. It's actually not why it's dark. And this is a bit of a scientific or astronomical riddle, I suppose. And of course, it's in the book.
It's in the book.
So do read the book to find out this very interesting answer as to why it's actually dark. But as Jon was saying, bringing to my attention recently, you know, you could ask a similar confounding riddle by daytime as well. Well, actually, given out of the Earth's sort of biosphere, beyond the atmosphere, it's all dark out there. So why isn't it dark down here?
Yeah.
Which is another confounding and brilliant question. And I'm actually not going to satisfy your curiosity by just answering it in that sort of simple, you know, way that I've found out. I just think the questions, you know, are the interesting bits, really. Not always, I mean, the answers are fascinating too, but somehow just getting you on the trail, following your own nose, your own curiosities, delighting even in the mystery, is part of a, an experience, that very chimes with the nighttime. So let's just leave it hanging, John. And trust that there's, going to be some people getting on that trail to answer those questions. Why is it like? Why is it that? We should mention the 3 Ds. As a clue.
As a clue.
You can if you want.
There is a little clue in here. It's called the 3 Ds. Ds as in dog, but it's not about dogs. Okay. So see if you can discover what the 3 Ds are.
What a tease.
What a tease. So yeah, I just wonder whether we did forget to say right at the beginning, if people have got any questions, do put them in the chat as we go through. I just wonder whether have you got a favourite story that you have about the night?
I mean, that would be like asking me which one of my 4 children is my favourite. It's very hard to come up with, favourites, because it's the one you're telling at the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, in Campfire Time in the book, I go into a little bit about the business and the matter of storytelling, which is such a kind of, congruent skill and dimension to bring in, particularly if you're facilitating.
Yeah.
Lean into those narrative skills, practice them, and offer them up. The campfire, I think, is a very generous place, an easy place to practice, where the light is a little down, you feel less under the spotlight. So there are various tips and tricks to support, that practice in here. And how it began for me as a storyteller, and as a sort of outdoor practitioner, was around those first campfires that everyone I've trust on our wild nights out. And I tell you, without fail, every single time I was taking school children out for a night walk and coming back to the campfire, once they've got their midnight feast out, the question would invariably come, who's got a ghost story? Does anyone know a ghost story? It would come from the children. Now, at that time, and we're going back to, very early 1990s, I didn't know a ghost story, but I picked up on the cue and soon learnt one to tell up in the in the end of those night walks and around the campfire, and it went very well. It was clear the children were hungry for it. What's more, they were hungry to be even more frightened, and invariably the refrain at the end of the story was, "Can you tell us another? Have you got a more scary one?" So there is a whole, body of, narratives that are in that category, some of which I absolutely love, because they are super scary. And they're about, all the things we dread in the night and that we project with our wild imaginations lurk, there, those goblins and boggarts and bogles and will-o'-the-wisps. So I've got a whole lot of stories, that come out of the bag where appropriate, to play around with that sort of idea. But at the same time, there's other stories that are a bit more about, enchantment. And the business of being enchanted sometimes, introduces a sort of the folk tale or the fairy realm, and those are wonderful, kind of messengers really from the night time and the dusk time, the dimpsy time as we call it in Devon, that betwixt in between time, to conjure up a sort of poetic sensibility about the night and cultivate an affinity and a kinship with that realm just through the sort of mystery and the magic of some of those narratives. So it really will depend, on what we're up to.
Yeah.
And then, of course, with great relish, when the kids have gone to bed, I'll be able to pull out some of those really nasty stories. Whoa, that you wish when you're lying in your tent at night, you wish you'd never asked for. So there is, as a storyteller, a great relish really in diving into any of these sort of areas, and worth learning. Worth learning a few.
Definitely. Yeah. Because the more you learn it, the more they can actually participate in it. Because then there's that whole freedom that once you can already tell us tale, you can really connect with the people and the place and the night, and sort of weave the story into the place, can't you? At the time?
Definitely, definitely, yeah. It's curious though, isn't it? The interest for getting ourselves uncomfortable and scared. I mean, we have that with a horror film, don't we? People love going to cinema and see horror films. I can't cope with them really. I really do get too frightened. But with with the stories, they just love being scared. What's that about? I wonder. I could sort of project and speculate some thoughts and ideas about something that we've maybe lost and that we're trying to call back in. Some of that, our sort of more natural place in the kind of wider spectrum of, living things and living in a wild world, and, calling something back in there, remembering our vulnerabilities, something in there that's good for us. Of course, on another level, it's just pure entertainment, isn't it? And it becomes gripping and spellbinding. What's going to happen next? This sense of jeopardy that we just love. But it's still a curiosity to me, just how much hunger there is for that.
Yeah. So I've just noticed, just looked at the time, there are a few questions here. Let me just go up. Lewis has asked a couple. Just going to try and expand. How do we get back up to there? Here we go. So, question from Lewis.
Yep.
Hey, Miss. So, Lewis, I know he's a forest schooler, so I know quite a lot of people here on sort of longer term programs where they've got repeated experiences. And this one says, should this be the same with nighttime experiences where it's a regular thing, or are they sufficient just in small doses? And there's a follow-on. You might want to ask both of these. What tips can you give to practitioners who want to involve nighttime experiences in their provision regularly? So there's a couple of things. One's about standalone, I guess, and do we then have to adapt, and how do we attune them if it's just a one-off? And if we are doing this regularly, any thoughts on that?
Well, if there is, if you've got the blessing of, some sort of regular contact, with a group of people who can gain, a cumulative experience and acquaintance with the nighttime, you really want to lean into got some ringing there. Lean into, I think, the cosmic dance, really, and just pay attention to what's phenomena is happening with the dark, whether it's, what phase the moon is in, for example, what stars are in the sky in different seasons. And of course, alongside those, there are all sorts of narratives, again, to gain acquaintance with, to practice and help to spell out, the dramas that are happening. The Arabs and the Greeks were so good at describing. So I would definitely, kind of learn the rhythm of the year, the lunar year, the solar year, the things that move in the heavens. And there are things to then look forward to and differences to take note of. So there's that. A wildlife calendar, there's also seasons there to take advantage of, what's abroad at different times of the year, and why. So again, learning some of those little stories that the creatures will tell us, and then basing your activities on those, being what's around and what's abroad and what's likely and what's possible. So I think, and there's endless information, of course, available. Some of it's in this book to help with that. In terms of standalone things, well, it really depends on the time of year and the group. There are many, very variables, aren't there? Maybe not be over ambitious would be one cautionary kind of note, and not to overexpose people to the dark or the cold, because it could take just one, overindulged, night walk with people maybe not properly equipped with clothing on a cold night or a wet night to put them off for life.
And
yeah,
check your route. I always sort of, particularly if they're new to it, because the big thing is if you are walking into things, tripping over, it's that all that stuff's quite
absolutely.
important.
Accessible
Yeah.
paths, you know,
Yeah.
right size sort of group, you know, you've checked it by day and by night, of course, already. And so, you know, your exit strategies and things if someone does have a fall. I mean, touch wood, you know, it's remarkable how actually careful
Yeah.
people are on these things.
Yeah.
And they do bring their senses to the
Sensing,
table and
that's
their
right.
alertness. So we've had nothing untoward in the night. We had one fella fall asleep actually on a little sit spot, and I nearly went home, you know, without him still asleep in the forest. He was an adult, but I think that's the
Yeah.
closest we've come to losing anyone.
Yeah, it's funny because I was thinking about forest school where it's often very stationary, but when we've done nighttime things with that, particularly moving into autumn and winter, it is that walk away from the site that can be really exciting in the night. So it's just checking on that. And I just think we're missing something rich there, just seeing how the dusk time changes. What is singing and stopping singing at different times, and likewise the other end at dawn. We used to take, you know, occasionally say, right, we're going to meet you really early in the day before the sun has risen, because just that whole thing, particularly during April, May time, June, if you get a chance, just listening how the dawn chorus shifts can be amazing. Just what's
profound.
Wakening up. Yeah.
Yep. I think those are the salient sort of points really. And be bold, be brave, I think, with it, you know, trust that everyone will have a real interest in getting to know something that's very unfamiliar. And you know, the other thing, of course, is don't be over ambitious with the length of the trail. It doesn't need to be very far at all in the dark, because you'll probably be stopping and pausing and doing some little activity along the way. So you know, often an hour and a half is plenty.
Definitely. Yeah. There's a little one here, which I think we've probably touched on really. It's maybe back to what are your favourite activities? It depends for getting kids outside when they're new to this. Simple things for parents or teachers.
Okay, so I mean, there's probably one thing to talk about there, which is, you know, over the years, being in a position to facilitate people's relationship to the dark on camp. We've encouraged those who are very trepidatious out into the night with the hook of a game, a bit of play. And those games in the dark, those kind of sneaking games in the dark, are absolute genius. The games are so good. They are having so much fun. They forget. They forget that they're terrified of the dark. And I tell you, you know, once they've been through a game of Predator in the dark, which is kind of, you know, in a playful way, very terrifying because it's about people sort of jumping out at you. And it's very safe and it's contained, but it sorts it out. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've said that really, really got over my fear of the dark, you know, and it's play. It's those games. So those are some of the things. And the games, if the games are, you know, intriguing and interesting, they will get even the most cynical teenagers out too, especially those hunting sort of games at night, which, again, there's quite a few in here. So that would be my top tip. Right,
great. I'd reinforce that too. I've just had the most hilarious moments during games in the dark. I'll never forget where just the laughter just went on for about 20 minutes. It just completely broke the ice, and we all calmed down after that, and we went off for a sit spot that was probably the quietest. It was just brilliant. Yeah. Reinforce that. So, just thinking what time. We finished at 1:15.
Should be time for questions.
Yeah. So, so that's a few questions that have come from people. It would be good to hear if anybody's got any more questions to ask. either about the book or about going outside, whether you're a parent or with groups, just taking people out at night. So you can either type them in. I'm not sure whether everybody's muted, how that is, Rosie. Oh, there's Kate. Hi, Kate. Finally, we've seen somebody. Yes.
We have.
Oh, we can't hear you, Rosie.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah. We have Kate has raised her hand, so I'm just wondering if she has a question. You want
to unmute yourself, Kate? Hi.
Hi. Fabulous talk. Love it. And I was just, it wasn't a question. It was just to say that a mate and I yearly go out in a bivvy on the South Downs. We shouldn't do, I know, because it's not allowed, but we disappear on the Downs and just find this little hollow to sort of squirrel down in. And a couple of years ago, we were up there, and I just sort of took myself away from where we were. We were near Chanctonbury Ring, which is very populated where we are. And I just took myself away from the site, and I just lay down to look up at the stars. It was probably, I don't know, midnight, 1 o'clock. And I was absolutely blown away because a badger literally walked straight past me. And I just was lying there looking at the stars, and I could sense, before I saw or heard, I could sense this thing coming along beside me, and I just literally didn't move. I just glanced, and I was like, oh, it's the badger. It's just the closest I've been to nature. And he didn't know, he wasn't bothered that I was there. He could obviously sense that I was there, and it was just magical, absolutely magical. And I need to do more of this myself. I'd love to take the kids out and do it, but it's, I mean, we have, John, you know that I've got the Land Rover with the tent on top. And that we just camped in the fields the other weekend because we were like, we can't go anywhere else. Let's just camp in the field.
Great.
And it's just, we don't ourselves do it enough as practitioners. I know.
Totally. I think, I mean, the more we do it as practitioners, the more we're going to go out and feel confident taking people out. That's probably the key. If you are a practitioner or a parent, you need to sort of have that confidence and get that dirt under your own skin and tune into your own night eyes so that you can sort of just help others.
And book, I've already ordered.
No, that's great. It's lovely to see you. Yeah.
Thank you, Kate. And there is another question from Lewis, who has said, does storytelling in reduced lighting add something extra to your quiver of storytelling techniques, or does it force you to compensate for the reduced visual communication, which you wouldn't during the day?
Good question. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah. I think it's really helpful. The campfire is a really helpful kind of geometry for a start, because everyone's in a circle, so there's a kind of nice equality about that, and no one's on a stage or on the spot or separated out. The lighting's super helpful, because the other extreme, if you can imagine a stage with some kind of theatre lighting, bright spotlights, you can't even see anyone, terrifying kind of space really to consider telling in. So the campfire with sort of, flickering and low light, it is somehow easier. It's more gentle as a way to begin if you are beginning with the storytelling thing. I mean, light is fairly key to storytelling. It's not that you can't tell stories in the complete pitch black, of course. It's like a radio experience, isn't it? And we've all enjoyed, or I did, listening to Michael Hordern's, Lord of the Rings back in the day on Radio 4, because we can still sort of project on the cinema screen of our mind all the, the action playing out. But ideally, you'll have some light, because it's about relationship storytelling. It's about you staying in touch with your listeners and sort of adjusting things and adapting things accordingly, which is one of the reasons why this medium is so odd and strange, because there's no one there.
Can't see you.
But yes, so try to work on the light and the bright flames, really attend to that. But there is something quite sweet also about the journey of the story. Say it takes 10 or 15 minutes and those flames sort of dying, in time with the story sort of ending as well. So it's very, very low light, but that also allows our eyes to attune to, the dark, which they do, given that sort of time frame. I think, I'd always recommend, being able to see your audience. And I far prefer that sort of low light to bright light. And I think probably it would be true to say that, particularly to begin with, unless people are, experienced performers, that will be true for most people.
Yeah.
Stay away from the bright lights and stay away from the stage. Sit in circles, and the campfire is a brilliant place to start practicing.
I think it's the best place, campfire at night, where you all just huddle in together. There's something very intimate about it, isn't there?
Yeah. Not intimidating.
Yeah. I noticed Emma's put something up about putting chalk out on the path. There are a couple of things in here, again, just inviting you into this, about just looking at the constellations using chalk and white rocks and things on the ground, because sometimes it's hard when you're pointing out, because some people can't quite focus in. So chalk, white rocks can be really helpful. So there's a couple more questions here. One from Maria, which is, can you recommend an essential piece of kit other than logical warming clothing and hot drinks?
Well, it depends what you're up to, Maria.
Depends what you're doing.
You're looking for, funnily enough, binoculars are always, in my bag or around my neck at night, which sounds a bit perverse, doesn't it? But actually they do funnel in the available light in terms of seeing, things in the distance more clearly. They're really helpful. So if you're up for, wildlife spotting, or if there's going to be a moonrise or any phase of the moon, do take some binoculars with you, would be my top tip. What about you, Jon?
I'd leave bright torches behind, but if you've got little torches, particularly the red ones, they can be a really useful little bit of kit. Like the pen light type torches that just focus the light. If you're sort of just looking at just the intricacies of the night, it's always kids always, well, even adults, everybody's just wowed by just when you start illuminating things that are growing up trees or stuff. So that'd be one I'd definitely have in my kit. And possibly even a planisphere. Just with another little torch. But you can get these luminous planispheres now, so that you can help people and you can get the bigger ones. So if you are looking up to the night sky and trying to pick out constellations, they can be really helpful. I know we've all got apps now and stuff, but there's something about the app there's something about handling the planisphere and moving it around to the right date and all the rest of it, and knowing that you are turning in this turning sky that sort of is more congruent than just waving your mobile phone around. Because there's loads of nighttime apps now. Yeah.
We've got another question here from Victoria, who says, what is the youngest age you have done this successfully with?
Generally, when we're out looking after kids on camp, they're 8 years old and above. And when we're in loco parentis, when we're looking after them on these experiences. But that's not to say we don't do family events and camps, in which case parents are with them. It all depends on the child and the amount of sleep they've had, There's a real lovely intimacy about taking a small child out, at night. to behold them beholding the night. I highly recommend that. It's a magical time, a mysterious time, and they're safe in your arms, of course. So I don't know if there is a minimum age. I think if I was leading a group, you know, in terms of a sort of professional kind of bit of facilitation, then, you know, unaccompanied children would have to be at least 8 years old. And any younger, and of course, you're just adapting the walk to suit, you know, their capacities, really.
Yeah. Well, we've had early years groups out. We've been forest school groups and got used to the site and all the rest of it, and we've got a higher ratio. So, and often when we've done that and taken them out at dusk, so it's late afternoon in effect. We've tried to get parents to come along because there is something about that parent-child bonding at night that just, as Chris has said, just beholding all of that is beautiful. And just helping them feel safe. I mean, I took my first daughter out at night as soon as she was born. So,
Me too.
that was her first experience. As soon as she came out of the operating theatre, I just asked, I said, can I take her outside? Because it was a beautiful starlit night and there was something really special, and that will always stay with me. Just this small being that's just come out of the womb and is still in the womb of the night. It was just,
nice. Yeah, I
beautiful.
did that with all my children too.
Yeah. So I guess it's down to, how safe is it, and have you got enough adults with you and all of that. But yeah, don't be afraid to go down to, because it says 3 here, go down to 3 if you've got all that safety stuff sorted out.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, just as a footnote, you know, I've had 4 children, and they've all arrived into the world with a complete and utter innocence around the dark. There's been no innate fear of it initially. It's been really interesting to note that in those, whenever it arrives around 3 or 4 or something like that, there's this sudden sense of, oh, you know, there are things to be feared out there. And so it's going to be part biological as they gain more understanding of potential threats, but it's also the stories, you know, they're starting to hear a lot about, you know, things that might leap out at you in the dark and things that lurk in the forest and in the shadows. So there's a cultural aspect to that as well, but it's really interesting to note how it just wasn't immediately present in those early years. And I lived in cottages in very dark forests, so I really clocked that. And the moment really when it starts to arrive, to be afraid, and that's true of the forest too, to be afraid of what you can't see, to be afraid of, you know, the nighttime and what might be there.
Yeah. So, any more questions, Rosie, that we've missed?
I think that's it. We have a comment from Sally who says, our night walk was led by a blind person and his guide dog. Talk about blind leading the blind.
That's
great.
cool. I heard of
Lovely.
that. That's awesome.
But yeah, no, I think that's everything. Thank you guys. That's been a really fascinating conversation. Where are the best places for aside from your books, obviously, for people to sort of find out more about how they can explore the dark or how they can get their kids out exploring?
I mean, it's worth just checking, I guess, with the wildlife. It's going back to the wildlife trusts again, because quite a few wildlife trusts do lead things out at night, and depending upon which county you're in. National Trust, all the usual NGO stuff, they will have nighttime type events.
Not many, not often,
not
enough.
Between. There's definitely not enough, which is why this book's so, I mean, it's been desperately needed for years. Hopefully will facilitate more people going out. So
maybe for astronomical, you know, experiences, dark sky associations.
Yeah.
There are events taking place in those places where, you know, light pollution isn't around. So you could look for your nearest dark sky region. To go out for some sort of stargazing experience.
Definitely.
Great.
Yeah. And we've missed it, but we're thinking about planning another one, doing a Star Trek down here on Darmar, so you're out for the whole night.
Yes.
just walking across the moors.
Amazing.
With a series of stories and all the rest of it. So we're just
Yeah.
we're still to replan that again.
Yes, do check out the Wild Wise
So
website
check out, yeah,
for next year for that.
yeah,
Not brave enough,
yes.
foolish enough.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap up, but thank you both. And I put links in the chat to anyone who's interested in both books. But obviously, we'll send a follow-up to everyone just with a little bit more info and any resources. So
Great. Thanks
We'll let
everybody
you-
for coming. And yeah, look out the half moon tonight, because it's just, yeah, we're just on the last quarter. So I don't know, it should be quite clear here.
Look at it through binoculars.
Look at it through binoculars.
Blow your head off.
It's brilliant because it's just starting to wane. And there's supposed to be meteor showers around now as well.
Wow, lots of stuff to go look at tonight.
Lots of stuff going on, and as well as the owls and all the rest of it. Yes.
Amazing. All right.
Thanks, Rosie.
All right.
Thanks for
Thank you,
hosting.
guys.
Rosie.